Hello guys, do you like history? Well, let's get started then. This is briefly everything. Well, we do history, but on a timeline, and so it makes sense. Now today in this episode we'll start off 1200 BCE, around this area in the Levant, where we'll get to know some new people now. Oh, very exciting. The Phoenicians lived here then, and they were the descendants of the original Canaanites, the people who lived in this area here, Canaan then, obviously. The Phoenicians would reach their apex around this time. They traveled the oceans a lot and even went as far as current-day Britain and even Senegal, becoming incredibly wealthy, selling their unique purple dye that they made from sea snail, which also gave them their name, Phoenician, land of purple, named by the ancient Greeks. But the real reason why we actually care about these guys is because they, essentially, we can say, invented our language that we speak today. Here's their 22-letter alphabet that we came to pick up on. It's also the first alphabet in history which later on evolved into Arabic, Hebrew, Greek, and many, many more languages. So the Phoenicians and their language have affected almost all the languages that we know today. It doesn't look similar to our Latin alphabet, but Hebrew still uses similar grammatical structures today as the Phoenicians did 3,000 years ago. I feel like I have to say at this point, I'm sorry a little bit, because if you followed some of our Briefly Everything episodes, you might have noticed that we talk a lot about languages, and that is because I just like languages quite a lot. I run language schools all over the world, and it just happens that I'm very interested, so you have to know about these cool things as well, that I consider cool at least. Okay, so 1200 BCE now, moving down a little bit here, we'll basically move around with the span of 100 years now to 1100 BCE. Now we've learnt about the Phoenicians. In a few hundred years, they'll fight with the Greeks, whom I'd like to talk about a little bit now. In a few hundred years now, leaving the thousands and moving into the 850 BC, so the hundreds that is, a blind Greek man named Homer supposedly lived and wrote down the Iliad and the Odyssey, two of the major ancient Greek epics that, if they ever did happen, are believed to have occurred around this time that we are talking about on the timeline here. That would be around 1200 to 1100 BCE. The Iliad, the first poem, tells the story of the Trojan War between the Greeks, or Mycenaeans as you can call them as well, before we know them as actual or official Greeks. The Mycenaeans with Brad Pitt leading the charge, and they faced off against Troy with its impenetrable city. The famous story tells of how the Trojans are famously gifted a Trojan wooden horse that they bring inside only to realize too late that the Greeks hid inside it and could now conquer the city from within the walls. Spoiler alert here, the ferociously fighting godlike handsome Brad Pitt then gets shot in the heel, which is the only part of his body Mom held onto by when dipping him into the river Styx to make him invulnerable. So that part of his body was his only weak spot, thus coining the expression Achilles' heel, because Brad Pitt wasn't known as Brad Pitt in the movie, but obviously as Achilles, and that was his heel that I was talking about here, for that is his only weakness. Achilles' heel was so influential that we've even started using the term Achilles as a medical term for a part of our heel today. Very exciting. Now on to the Odyssey, the second poem, which picks up with a man, or actually a Greek king, Odysseus, who wants to return home after the Trojan War. So we follow his perilous 10-year-long journey where he'll conquer all sorts of mystical creatures and faces the wrath of the gods. All of these stories that I've just told you now were believed to be myths until just 100 years ago. Until this guy, Heinrich Schliemann, decided to go look, and to his delight, he actually found the city Troy as described in the books, and many other places from the stories in current-day Turkey. So the cities from the stories definitely existed, but we can't promise that anything else from the stories told actually did exist. These stories were all passed on orally and written down much later on by Homer. Trojan donuts. Now don't confuse this Homer guy with the Homer guy. These are two completely different guys with two completely different impacts on history. Now on that Homer note, I will now leave you. Thank you very much for watching and listening and appreciating what I'm trying to accomplish here. We've actually had 18 episodes so far, and in this 18th episode we talked about the Phoenicians, the original Canaanites. We talked a little bit about their language and how it has affected us all the way until now. And then we moved on to talk about the Greeks, whom the Phoenicians will be fighting in a few hundred years. And the Greeks with their Odysseys and the Iliad that are supposedly myths, but that, if not considered myths, were to play out around this time here. So I just went through them there quickly with you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.